Hello, everyone, and welcome to Social Work Survivor's Guide. I'm really excited that you've joined us today. We're going to be looking at self-care and starting our 12-week self-care series. So welcome aboard. This is an important introduction. Every week we're going to cover an aspect of self-care to help maximize your wellness in working with others. So today we're going to begin with a bit of an overview of understanding stress and understanding stressors. We're going to cover some things that will involve learning about our network of systems and the way in which our network of systems work together to respond to stress. And we will also begin to look at what we can do to better manage stressors. Just at the onset, I do want to say this video is for educational purposes, even though we will discuss systems of the body and a brief overview of what happens when you encounter stress. Please remember that this information is for educational purposes only. So let's start. Let's look at, first of all, what is stress? And in order for us to do so, we need to look at what and how our body responds to stress. So, stress is a constant phenomena. We cannot avoid stress. I want to repeat that because it's very important. We cannot avoid stress. We experience stress when we are awake, and we experience stress when we are asleep. Stress is what drives our body. We interact with stimulus around us, and so there really is no way in which we can live in a world that is stimulus free. We will talk about what a stimulus is, but it's very important to understand that stress cannot be avoided. So most self-care guides or most self-care practitioners start to talk about how to avoid stress. And I think that that is the wrong way to approach this conceptually. And more so for us professionally, as we grow into social work and social work service, our identities are built around the ways in which we manage the stimulus that's around us. Now that might be the consumers, participants that we work with. It may even be the larger organization that we belong to. And also, most importantly, it is our own sense of self, our sense of self-identity. All of these things can contribute to what is called stress. So let's look at what happens when we encounter stress. First and foremost, our body, the physiological reaction, is the immediate response to a stressor, some type of stimulus. What happens is we experience a stressor, a stimulus. Our brain goes into an alarm phase, and our body physiologically responds through development of stress hormones that then result in changes throughout our body and, more importantly, throughout our body system. Our body is comprised of 11 organ systems: the integumentary, the muscular, the skeletal, the nervous, circulatory, lymphatic, respiratory, endocrine, urinary, excretory, reproductive, and digestive systems. These all comprise many complex organs and organ systems that work with one another. We largely have very control over the way in which these systems operate. That isn't to say we don't have control over how we can maintain our systems, but that these systems largely run and operate on their own through a very delicate balance of electrical impulses from our brain, hormones, digestive processes, reproductive processes, etc., etc. So our systems are very complex. So when we experience a stressor, we experience this throughout our entire systems. But the physiological response is the response that occurs most often unconsciously, without our knowledge, that can then, over long term, can create issues for us. So our body responds in a way that includes two types of peripheral nervous systems: the somatic nervous system, which is under our direct control, and the autonomic nervous system, which is under involuntary or unconscious control. The somatic nervous system, the voluntary system, collects information about the outside world from our sensory organs, our ears, our eyes, our nose, etc., and transmits this information to our central nervous system. It then sends signals from our central nervous system to the skeletal muscles, which initiate movements, such as directing action of arms, legs, etc. We can voluntarily use these nerves to do such things such as raising an arm or moving a leg or twisting in a certain direction. So these are voluntary processes. The second nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, is the involuntary nervous system. The center of this is the hypothalamus, which is part of the brain that is called the primitive part of our brain. The hypothalamus receives information about variations, for instance, the body's chemical makeup, and adjusts the autonomic system to bring our body back to a balance. This involuntary process means we can't intentionally control these nerves. They respond automatically to internal as well as external messages as interpreted by our thoughts and emotions. So when our somatic nervous system is activated, again voluntarily, we use our sensory organs. Our involuntary system, the autonomic nervous system, is impacted by our thoughts and our emotions. So when we hear things such as thoughts have an effect on us and our body, that is very much true. When we hear things such as emotions have an effect on our body, that is very much true. The autonomic nervous system is comprised of three main components: the enteric nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic nervous system. The enteric nervous system is a nervous system that monitors and controls the GI tract, often called the little brain, because there is a neural system embedded in the lining of our esophagus, our stomach, our intestines, our pancreas, and our gallbladder. the adage of you are what you eat references the enteric nervous system. And it's a very complex process, but very simply put, there is very much a mind, body, in fact, mind digestive system process. Many of us experience stressors within our digestive and gastrointestinal tract. There is a reason why that occurs. So the enteric nervous system is an important system here. The next system, the sympathetic nervous system, responds more directly to stress thoughts and moods such as anger, worry, frustration, fear, excitement, etc. It produces a stress response to thoughts and moods. And the parasympathetic nervous system, which is very important, we will spend an entire week investigating the parasympathetic nervous system, because this nervous system is what is and what we can manage in terms of the stressors that we experience. So the parasympathetic nervous system responds more directly to calming thoughts and moods. And it is this parasympathetic nervous system that we want to work on as we begin to learn, as we begin to identify stressors. We can, in fact, manage our stress by helping manage the parasympathetic nervous system response. Very important. Often overlooked. There is no magic pill. There is no magic book. There is no magic set of exercises that you can do. It is simply understanding the role of stress within the nervous system and the role of the parasympathetic nervous system, and helping to manage the parasympathetic nervous system that will allow us to better manage our stressors. When both the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems are given an opportunity to function normally, they work in opposition to each other to keep the body in balance. When one is active, the other is subdued. The sympathetic nervous system stimulates the body, whereas the parasympathetic nervous system calms and relaxes the body. The sympathetic nervous system stimulates the body. The parasympathetic system calms and relaxes the body. So it is really key and important that we focus on the parasympathetic processes. Now, how do we experience stress beyond this? Well, we have Dr. Hans Selye to thank. In the 20th century, he developed what was called the stress of life, which identified 3 stages of stress response, and the general adaptation syndrome, or GAS. So the general adaptation syndrome is the alarm stage in which we experience stress. The stress triggers a stress response. The stress response causes a secretion of hormones, creates specific physiological, psychological, and emotional changes that enhance the body's ability to deal with a threat, to fight or flee. The resistance stage, the stress response changes are engaged to give the body an extra boost in energy and resources to deal with a threat. And the exhaustion stage, after the threat is passed, the stress response ends and the stress hormones are used up or expelled. The body enters a recovery phase where it recovers from the stress response changes and rebuilds its energy stores for next time a stress response is needed. If we experience prolonged stress, the the body quite naturally goes into an exhaustive stage. So it's very key that when we experience stress, that we are able to manage it and not allow it to become long-term. Because it is these long-term stressors that impact the body's ability to recuperate. It is the long-term stressors that impact the body's ability to recuperate. So it's really key as well, that when we are stressed, when we experience stressors, that we keep in mind the longer we experience these stressors, the longer and more protracted the response and exhaustive phase will be. The longer we experience these stressors and the longer that we experience this exhaustive phase, unfortunately, the longer it will require our body to recuperate,